Once again, I welcome all of you in this topic social justice issues and in-depth exploration. In the last session, we have discussed about the social justice, the meaning, the concept, the principles, the components, and all. So today we are going to discuss about the kind of area where we needs to intervene, right? So in contemporary society, several pressing social justice issues need to be addressed, like economic inequalities, racial injustice, gender injustice, disability injustice. So injustice are there in society. Nowhere in the world you can say that society is so much just 100% just. In everywhere the injustice is there, but depending upon the degree it may varies, right? So each of these issues represent a critical area where marginalized communities are denied their basic rights, and addressing them requires systematic change in policy, culture, and practices. So we need to, as a social worker, we have to work at all the level, at the micro, meso, and macro level, to bring social justice. At the micro level, we have to sensitize them to bring the underprivileged, and then the people who are considered to be the haves not, bring into the pace, bring into the space where the haves are already there. We also have to work for the haves as well if the problem is there. So holistically, we have to look into the community at the meso level, and we have to bring changes into the policy which is more, we could say, the applicable and conducive and more practical for application for the community who are underserved, who are marginalized. Now social justice and in-depth exploration says that social justice is a multifaceted and ever evolving concept that encompasses fairness in the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privilege within society. So as it is ever evolving, humans are ever evolving, and we have seen that how the community has changed. So as the community has changed, the kind of needs and requirements has also been changed, and so the social justice has also been changed. So be it in the wealth part, or economic part, or the education part, or in any area, it aims to dismantle the barriers that prevent marginalized groups from achieving equality. So very important to to actually dismantle the kind of the barriers which actually the reason as in considered to be as a gap, to actually prevent the underprivileged to get all kind of the resources and privileges which are common for the haves people, or the people from the coming from the upper class or upper caste, or sometimes the more privileged gender, right? So just moving ahead, what are the areas which is important to look into and to analyze, right? As the topic has talked about the in-depth exploration. So that one thing, the first important thing is about the economic inequalities. At the heart of the economic inequality is the concentration of wealth in the hands of few. That is what the capitalist society and capitalist community, where the wealth is in hand of few, leaving large segment of the population struggling to meet the basic needs. So we just see in India how that millionaires and the major amount is in how major economy in the hand of very few, the few millionaires and billionaires, and the majority of our country is poor. And that is true with every country, with everywhere, right? But again only the differences in the degree here, where the more the accumulation of the money or the economy in few hands, the more kind of the disparities in that community, right? So economic inequality is there. So economically is one of the most pervasive social justice issues, with the gap between the rich and the poor, and it is more obvious kind of the social justice, right? To widen in many countries, this growing divide actually further creates social division and created unequal opportunities. As it grows further, the gap has been widened, thus kind of the injustice further further grows more and more. So the people it's actually the poverty create a vicious circle. Whoever belong to the poor community, they are not able to give the education to their children, and the children, once they grow up without any education, so they are they continuously survive in with the little, very little. And this looking into the communities with has all kind of the opportunities in terms of the wealth. So there particularly they just multiply their money more and more into more and more outcomes. So their community is further growing farther, and the gap has been widened. And it is one of the very important and you could say the sad repercussions of any capitalist community. And all the world after the globalization is moving towards, I mean, very fast towards this whole capitalism, right? The gap between haves and haves not has been increased, not at the very micro level, but at the very macro level, at the global level even. You can see, very easily identify, few countries became so rich and few countries are became so poorer. So you just take the example of African countries, how they have been used, right? And same, if you take the example at the micro level, you can very easily identify what is happening in the nation wise, at the state wise. Some states became more richer because of the good industries and more resources and opportunities, and the another states are not. Even within the same states, there's a wider gap between the between the urban and the rural, and within the same urban areas there you can find a lot of the gaps between the haves and haves not, rich and poor. So this is what the economic inequalities actually creates a kind of the vicious circle. And the social justice says that to need to break this kind of the vicious circle is so important. uh, and then racial injustice, again, since the time immemorial, human actually create a lot of the injustice in the name of the race. Racial is deeply embedded in the historical fabric of many societies, particularly in countries with history of colonization, slavery, and segregation. Despite progress in civil rights and human rights, this actually been targeted and been discussed so much so far in the many fields. But even though there are a lot of the racial injustice is been witnessed in all over the world, particularly we are more concerned about our own nation and our own area and our own area of intervention. So we have to look into the injustice from from the employment perspective, from the housing, criminal, and education. In everywhere, racial injustice has been witnessed, in the housing, and then criminal injustice everywhere. So there are a lot of examples coming in my mind, but you just have moving ahead. Gender injustice. Gender injustice refer to the unequal treatment of individual based on their gender, which has historically disadvantaged women and girls in nearly every aspect of life. We have seen that how that's why that feminist approach has been there to support the particular the women as a gender, right? Because we all heard about the glass ceiling effect and how this gender pay gap. So in the despite of giving same amount of the efforts, the women are getting lesser amount of the money. If, particularly in the unorganized sector, this is a very common phenomena. Okay, glass ceiling effect is the aspect usually the women is not been promoted as equally as to the male counterparts in many countries. However, after the the idea of human resource management, all this has been checked. And but even though you don't find, I mean, even you just take the example of America, you don't even you we don't have, I mean, America still don't have any women president there, right? We are so fortunate that we have. So we had already, right, president as well prime minister. So this is what the glass ceiling effect and this gender injustice in political what I am giving. But in the social sphere also, in everywhere, every day of life, particularly if women belong to the lower class, from the poor family, you just imagine the plight of those women, right? So the opportunities are comparatively less to the women as a gender, counter to their male counter to the males in their own family and to their own community, right? So coming to the next is about the disability injustice. um, Disability injustice is critical but often overlooked aspect of social justice. People with disabilities face significant barriers to getting education. Accessibility is difficult for them. They have not been taken their participation in number of the aspects and number of the programs in the of the community, including they usually discriminated in employment. It's very common, right? Limited access to in every sphere of life they have actually experienced throughout their life. They have been called with some bad names, right? So despite legal frameworks or the United Nations Convention the rights of persons with disability, many individuals with any kind of the disability continue to experience exclusion and marginalization. Okay, coming to the environmental injustice. So environmental injustice refers to the disproportionate impact of the environmental hazards on marginalized communities, particularly communities of color and lower income population. These communities are often located near sources of pollution such as factories, waste treatment plants and landfills, and are more vulnerable to the effects of the climate change, including the extreme weather events and then rising sea levels. Right. So this environmental injustice is also one area we have to look into that. So again, if you look at the micro level, so many a time this uh, okay, just leave this example again. It goes beyond. It talks about the geopolitical aspect. So even looking into the environmental injustice, the discards aspect has been or creating some slums as a junkyards by the community who is considered so clean, so from the belong to the very privileged community or called as a very privileged community. So they don't want any kind of the bad looks into their community, so they just actually put all those things which is considered to be polluted and something like that, so to the some slum area. So this is what the environmental injustice. They also have the right to have a clean water, clean air. So in totality, if you look into this perspective and this environmental injustice, it's about that being human, every one of us have the right for the clean water, clean air, and then a clean space and clean places. It's not only the rights of the privileged community that they have to access to the clean water. You just imagine the communities living into the very underserved areas. They don't actually access to the clean water to drink. So this is again what the environmental injustice. Constitutional provisions for safeguarding these social justice are like the preamble of our nation, of our country, the fundamental rights, the DPSP, that is directive principle of state policy, the reservation policy. These are some kind of the constitutional provisions for safeguarding the any kind of the unjust in the area of the social justice, right? So the preamble, like the Indian Constitution, sets the tone for social justice very initially, that declaring India as a sovereign country, as socialist, secular and democratic country. As it is democratic country, everyone has the right to participate and right to come forward on having all the kind of the rights to avail any kind of the resources. They specifically mention justice, social, economic and then political sphere is one of the key objectives of the constitution. This means that the state is obliged to ensure that all citizens, regardless of their caste, class, or any kind of the background, they're treated very fairly and equitable, right? So the inclusion of the term social reflects the commitment to reducing inequalities in wealth, status, and then opportunities at any level. The fundamental right, like Article 14, that talks about the right to equality. Article 15, this talks about the prohibition of any kind of the discrimination against of the caste and all. Article 16 talk about the equality to opportunity in public employment, being belong to any gender, or by being belong to any caste or any class. Article 70 talks about the abolition of untouchability. That's totally and very specifically for safeguarding the scheduled caste communities. Article 23 talks about the prohibition of human trafficking and forced labor. So we have witnessed the kind of the forced labor and then bonded labor in our country. So this particular article actually make them free. So freedom is, as we have discussed, the very important principle and objective of the social justice. Article 24 talks about the prohibition of child labor. So child labor is, again, as we discuss about the poverty as creating a vicious circle. So child labor is somewhere entangled and somewhere in the part of this vicious circle. The child belongs to a poor family. He and she is forced to do work in some areas, maybe some hazardous area. Now thankfully that it has to be regulated by that the child should not be work in any hazardous industries or the factories or the workplace. But overall this has been supported by this fundamental right, that is the Article 24. Okay, so moving ahead, this directive principle of state policy, although this is what they cannot be legally enforced, uh, this directive principle of state policy, depending upon the state identify and then demands of the community or so their members. So guide the state in formulating policy that promotes social justice and welfare. So DPSP reflects the actually vision of a welfare state and outline the state's responsibility to work towards the social, economic, and then cultural upliftment for all citizens, creating, developing kind of good roads and then parks and all, so and many more. So it is not actually mandatory or legally enforced, but it is what the kind of helpful in formulating the policy and helpful at the intervening at the macro level, right? As for example, Article 38 talk about the welfare of, promotion of the welfare of the people, maybe belonging to a, any gender or aging population. So that could be guided by Article 38 of the DPSP. Article 39 talks about the principle of, policies to followed by the state, and the Article 41 talks about the right to work, education, public assistance that could be, by the state. They can, generate some kind of the jobs, they can support it, and they can provide the training. So any kind of the social, services, or any kind of the kind of the activities which could be reinforced by the directive principle of state policy by any state. So reservation policies as is the instrumental into bringing the equity, right? The constitution provides actually for the reservation of seats in legislature and public employment for SC/STs and OBCs. These provisions were designed to affirmative action measures to uplift historically disadvantaged communities. So it is affirmative action actually to support those who have already been discarded, have already been disadvantaged historically since time immemorial. So this is the time they have been given their rights to bring their life into the normalcy. Social justice and human rights. So this is what the next aspect of this whole week discussion. So social justice and human rights, what is the common aspect with both are actually intrinsically linked, as the pursuit of social justice aims to ensure that all individuals have equal rights, equal access, fundamental rights, and the freedom, addressing systematic inequalities and actually to resolve any kinds of the inequalities and promoting dignity and equity for marginalized communities. So both human rights and then social justice looking into the same, as Matthew Robinson has very defined that social justice are promoting a just society by challenging injustice and valuing diversity. So social justice fundamental aspect is to work on the injustice. It exerts when all people share a common humanity and therefore have a right to equitable treatment, support for their human rights, and fair allocation of common resources. So being human, everyone have the equal rights to access and having all the kind of the opportunities to live a good life as like others, and have all the this also can be looked after by the social justice. The United Nations also defines social justice as the fair and compassionate distribution of the benefit of economic growth, and as a principle for peaceful and prosperous coexistence. So social justice as per the UN has how they looking at the social justice. So social justice of any country, of any state, or as a general, as a whole worldwide, is so important, because as a principle for peaceful and prosperous coexistence, it is important coexistence between haves and haves not. Social justice is the view that everyone deserves equal economic, political, and social rights and opportunities. What is the meaning of human rights, right? So human rights actually encompasses civil, political, economic, social, cultural identity or cultural rights. They include the right of life, right of freedom of expression, equality before the law, education, and participation in cultural activities. Importantly, human rights cannot be taken away except a specific situation and according to the due process, such as the restriction of a certain freedom during the national emergency, that is somehow exceptional. So human rights are the basic rights and freedom to which all individuals and entitled simply because they are human. So being human is the what that gives you the strength to get all the kinds of the human rights. These rights are universal, inalienable, and inherent to all. be belong to any country of the world, regardless of race, gender, nationality, ethnicity, religion, or any other status. So human rights are essential for ensuring dignity, freedom, and equality, and as they are foundation for just and fair society. So definitely human rights working at the macro level, but looking at the micro level, and social justice working at the mainly at the micro level, but policy making from the macro level. The concept of human rights is built on several key principles like the universality. Definitely human rights are applied to everywhere, to all the people without any exceptions, belong to any country, belong to any caste and class. So universality is one very important principle of human rights. Next is the indivisibility, that is human rights interconnected and interdependent. The fulfillment of one right often relies on the fulfillment of other. For example, the right to health depends on the right to food, clean water, clean air, education, and all. So that is what indivisibility. You cannot divide one right to another right. So human rights, one right is also giving right to attain to other rights, right? So and then is the inalienability. This is what human rights cannot be taken away, even if a government or any authority tries to do so. So human rights is a at a macro to macro. If any nation actually denied to give in you any kind of the rights or human right being virtue of born as a human, so human rights at the at the international level, they come and support you, right? Then equality is again very important principles of human rights as of the social justice. So equality and non-discrimination, both you can called as can go hand to hand. So equality, non-discrimination, if there is no non-discrimination, equality would be there. So all individuals are entitled to having all these kinds of the rights without any kind of the discrimination based on any kind of the race or gender or age or other or any other factor. Age is also important aspects taken into consideration, because the world is actually growing more rapidly, right? More rapidly, I mean the population, where the countries who are having the negative pyramid of population, so they have more aging population. So the looking at the right of the aging is also important, and many a time in many countries you see, and many community you see that in many families the aging or the elder of the family is not giving due respect, that they are because this is the age of need a lot of the respect, and that needs a dignified survival. So that is what it's very important, that taking into consideration this very important population, that is the aging population. Okay. uh, and these are the some of the types of human rights, like the civil and political rights, economic, social, and cultural rights, collective or solidarity rights. So these are some of the rights of or human rights. So actually sustainable human development means expanding all people's choices and creating the condition for equality, so that they may realize their full potential. This goal is unrealizable if all human rights, economic and social, cultural, civil and political, are not promoted, preserved, and defended. So this sustainable human development talks about that you cannot you can bring the sustainability in the area of the social justice, in the area of the equality, in the area of the equity, in the area of the creating a more just society. Should be based on the people choices and the creation of condition for equality, so that they themselves realize their potential. This goal is unrealizable in all human rights, means if it has not been there in the area of the economic, social, cultural, civil and political, are not promoted, preserved and defended. So in totality, holistically, it has to be preserved, defended and promoted. And who are going to promote, preserve and defend their rights as a human rights in all the sphere of life? So definitely one as a change agent, as the answer is the social workers and the community workers. Thank you so much for today's lecture, for listening so carefully.